Hello, everyone, and welcome to Charter Forward. My name is Logan Schuyler, and I just want to start this show off by giving a quick rundown of what it's going to look like. This show is going to be a political and social analysis and commentary, like a bunch of shows that you guys probably watched today. It's going to be a lot of breaking news headlines regarding politics and social commentaries, but also topics that I'm very interested in and want to cover in a little more detail. And, the main reason I wanted to start the show is because there's a lot of people on their podcasts who just talk shit. So I thought I'd come and do the same and, waste a few hours of your day. And, hopefully I can make some of you laugh and offer some insights and deeper insights so you can understand the world that you operate in a little better and, maybe offer some solutions. What are my qualifications? Why the fuck should you bother listening to this? Right now I'm earning my degree in political studies. My hope is I can sincerely do my work, right, and leave this world in a better condition than what I found it, right? I want to help build, sustainable systems that return society to, kind of a sanity. It's not like I'm going to be the fucking Jesus Christ guy, but, fix the world. But maybe I can do my part to return it to a little bit of sanity. I'm going to have a lot of people, once the show gets a little bigger, I get a little more experience with recording, get some better equipment, better mics, better recording software that I can bring, for example, my professors or my peers and colleagues in, whether in studio or in virtual land. The goals are way above my level of capacity right now, but this, like life, this journey is a slow process and I'll get better, and I've dedicated my life to it since I was a young man. One of the first things I wanted to kick off with this show is a topic that's been rattling around in my own brain. And that is, conservatism is the new progress. I wouldn't say conservatism. I'd probably say right-wing-ism is the new progress in this world. And, it's a bold claim in 2025 that the right wing is the only real progress. But it is, and it's the only real progress for young people in the West. And it's not just a slogan. It's a reflection of what young voters are actually doing. When you go to the polls and you go look at who's voting, it's a lot of young people voting a lot right wing. Right. And today I want to break down why I believe that's the case. I'm going to base my argument on two main pillars. Number one is culturally, the hollowness of that progressive liberalism. It doesn't lead anywhere, right? It's a hedonistic lifestyle that doesn't offer any deeper meaning to life. And I would say that it's under two understandings of the world. It's unfeathered freedom versus principled, disciplined freedom. There's a book by Jocko Willink. You guys probably have heard of him. Discipline equals freedom. That's kind of what I'm basing that argument off of. And number two is the tangible results. Liberalism, liberal progressivism, I'd say, because I want to make that distinction between liberalism and liberal progressivism, because these are not the same. And that has to do with neurolinguistic programming. That's a whole other topic, whole other episode that requires a lot of explanation. But that liberal progressivism is very deconstructivist, right? And the right wing right now are builders by default. I think it's drawing in a lot of people who are builders by default. So let's just break into this thing. Number one, the hollow core of progressivism. And I wanted to start off with the cultural pillar of my argument. Let's start with why it's not working. Liberal progressivism today has become obsessed with unfeathered freedoms. Excuse me. I'm not sure if I said feathered. They're just obsessed with sex and an undisciplined lifestyle and the worship of money and materialism and the idealizing of celebrities. It's a very hedonistic lifestyle. It's a hedonistic culture that's pushing. And I think that there's dark undertones behind it. And I think the people that are pushing that hedonistic culture have ulterior motives. But the people who are following it, they don't really see that. right? So we have to distinguish between those two and forgive the people that are following it because they know not what they do. But anyways, it's a worldview where nothing matters, right? There's no greater goal that you're trying to achieve. It's just enjoy. And what does that result in? It results in a weak person at heart. When we see these people, we see these undisciplined, unprincipled people who have no resilience, and their worldview leaves them lost. And with that kind of outlook on life, if you don't have a port that you're sailing to, no wind is favorable. And you're just a fucking feather in the wind, blowing to and fro, hoping the gods look favorably on you. Right? And right now I hear the gears of the Christians out there turning and blowing steam, and now the train's starting to get going. Just hold on. That's a different episode. And we see the result is weak beta males in men and crazy feminists in women. And, it's not that black and white when you meet people on the streets. Of course, it's different degrees of that. But those two kind of accentuate that kind of lifestyle. But we see a lot of videos of them on the internet and screaming like, ah! And they're just fucking screaming at people. You're like, are you fucking possessed? Do I got to get holy water and start throwing it on you? Like, back up. But anyways, they're not great people, right? When you meet them one-on-one, they're not good people deep down. They want to be, but they're not. They have no heart of courage. And Muhammad Ali said it best. I forget when it was, but he said, a man is his heart. A lying, cheating heart equals a lying, cheating man. And then he goes on to say a bunch of other shit that I can't remember, but it doesn't matter. Right? That hits at a greater undercurrent theme of these people. Under this worldview, there is no higher meaning. It's the lifestyle of unfeathered freedom is absolutely entertaining, but it's ultimately empty, right? And we're told that freedom means, by these people, these progressives, we're told that freedom means doing whatever you want to do, whenever you want. But that kind of freedom doesn't build anything. It doesn't create a legacy. And most importantly, it doesn't offer any structure. And I think that's the difference today. And it's leaving young people feeling hollow and lost and more depressed than ever. Here's some stats that I just want to bring up to you guys. Maybe you can chew on them. Something like 50% of young people are having little or no sex at all. Right, 1.2 million, and these are all Canadian stats. I'm sure you can look these up in the US, but 1.2 million Canadians and youth are affected by mental illness. Not surprised. Seeing the videos and the politicians we have today, I'm not surprised. 39% of Ontario students report symptoms of anxiety or depression. In 2019, 12% of youth ages 16 to 21 rated their mental health as poor or fair. In 2023, that number jumped to 26% in that same category. 62% of those who participated in that 2019 study still reported mental health issues in 2023. So what that's telling me is these people are mentally ill and no amount of therapy is helping them get better. It's and let's not pretend like, it's more stigmatized to go see a therapist today than it was even 5-10 years ago, 20 years ago. It's becoming more and more accepted. You know what I mean? Like it's not helping. And I'm going to just bring your attention to some young male stats. And this is from the Canadian Men's Health Association Foundation. Young men aged 19 to 29, 43% are at risk of moderate to severe depression. 57% report moderate to high anxiety. And of the 4,000 yearly suicides in Canada, 75% of them are men. Those are very concerning for a sociological perspective, because it's quite clear that young men are not doing good. And I think it's because progressives are telling young men that they're toxic and that they're the problem in society. And that's just not beneficial to anybody, right? Progressives are telling young women that all men are bad, all men are pigs, and that the hardcore feminists, right? I want to distinguish between liberal progressives and those hardcore liberal progressive feminist types, right? And it's not helpful to anybody, men or women. So segment 2, I just want to move into this next segment, a glimpse into a moral psychology of these people. And I'm basing my arguments not wholly, but in part on this Jonathan Haidt's book, The Righteous Mind, because it offers a really useful lens to actually understand these people's mindsets going in. In this book, I'm not going to give you a whole rundown, but in the book, he argues that moral judgments come from gut intuitions, not reason, primarily. And that kind of contrasts that Enlightenment phase that your moral judgment should come from reason. And once you have that gut intuition, you then use reason to justify that intuition. Right? So again, one of those things with the Charlie Kirk assassination is these people had the gut intuition of fuck him, he deserves to die. And then they justified it by saying, well, he said this, that, or the other thing. He believed this, he was an evil person, da, 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 da. Right? Instead of just recognizing that it's an evil thing that happened to somebody. Right? So that's one of those examples. And Haidt outlines 6 moral foundations. He calls them taste buds. That different ideologies emphasize differently. Liberals tend to focus heavily on the care and fairness, while right-wingers, that would be the left wing, they tend to focus more on care and fairness and social justice and things like that, while right-wingers tend to focus their value codes on all 6 of his taste buds, right, more evenly, with a little more emphasis on loyalty, authority, and sanctity. But these foundations, they shape how we see the world, and it often feels like the left wing and the right wing are living in 2 different moral universes, and I think that's pretty strong. Why, right? And I do believe that there's social science. I don't have the source on me right now. By the way, can we stop with this bullshit that everyone has to have sources on them right now? Like I'm supposed to whip out a fucking black binder and start flipping through pages to find one. Anyways, these focuses produce different types of people. And I think that conservatives are builders by choice or builders by default. They're not really builders by choice. It's just who they are as people. Right-wingers build, and progressives are very deconstructionist. They like to point out the problems, but they never build anything, right? When progressives, they gain power, they often misunderstand the systems that they're trying to reform. And there's things that we all have to do to reform these systems, absolutely. But they make these sweeping changes in the name of equality, hoping that the system's going to magically become what they want it to be. But again, systems in the real world don't work that way. And right-wingers are quite realistic when they address these problems. Right? But anyway, right-wingers are more builders by default. So when it comes to the real tangible progress, we see them push for pipelines, push for railroads and building bridges and building roads and making sure that houses are actually being built that make life more affordable. Right? And again, the realists, they measure their success by tangible progress, not by slogans or plans about making meetings to discuss future plans. Right? And I think that's why when we're watching the housing market and the cost of living is because it threatens their core purpose, right? Which is raising a family and enjoying the fruits of your hard work. I call it a survival gene. Right-wingers trade instant gratification for that long-term reward, and it idealizes discipline and self-control and resilience and wisdom and legacy, right, ultimately. And it's about building something that our children can inherit and they can use to leap forward and leave their children, our offsprings, right? We can bequeath to them a better society than the one we grew up in. And I think that a little bit contributes to that old saying that hard times create good men create good times create weak men create bad times. I think that has to do a little bit with that cycle that, the generation that we raised didn't really have the struggle. So we should definitely figure out how we can introduce some struggle into them and, give them a little more resilience than what we're leaving them with. But again, with the way that these right-wingers are builders by default and they want pipelines and things like that, they're more tangible in their progress, right? When liberals and progressives, right, I'm using that term a little interchangeably, but when they talk about this green transition, right, it's always nice plans and good slogans and things like that. But when you're forcing people like a carbon tax, or you're forcing people to participate in that, and you're forcing this green transition into solar panels and wind power like they're doing in Germany, the result is that you are sacrificing the poor and the working class, because they're the ones that are going to be affected first by the cost increases of, energy. And when it comes to that energy, that is an economic resource of the individual, right? It's an asset. How much you're paying for these inputs into your life, right? So when you see a gigantic cost of power increase because of hydro in Quebec, I think, and in Ontario, that was a big issue. That's why Doug Ford got elected, if a lot of you don't remember. When you force these transitions through, and we can see this in Germany, they shut down all their coal-fired power plants and shit, and now they're forced to either buy energy from somebody else or rely on the wind and solar, which is causing a massive increase into the costs of power, right? And that hurts the working class more. And getting back to the carbon tax, the rich don't give a fuck about a carbon tax. They'll just pay the extra money to fly on their private jet, and then they'll write it off on their business as an expense. You know what I mean? It's affecting poor people more because now they can't go travel to see their family, right? They can't travel to work. They have to find some other mode of transportation, which is the point of it. And right there just kind of highlights how evil that program is, that you're forcing people to transition into something else. But I'm personally a person who values individual liberties quite strongly. So I've never been one to force people to do something. I feel that if it's a better system, people will naturally want to switch over to it. So again, the carbon tax hurts the working class more. And that's tangible, right? People touch that every day. People are affected by the cost of groceries because of the carbon tax increase, or the cost of gasoline and things like that to put in their car. And they're just going to have to eat the costs. That's usually what ends up happening, which just makes the government more money, right? So it's not a tangible progress. But getting back to it, in an interview with Pierre Poilievre and Jordan Peterson before the last election, I think it was in January 2024, Poilievre said that the conservative movement in Canada is gaining traction among young people because it's offering something. It's offering the ability to buy a house, not an apartment, not some apartment where you can raise your kids. Nobody wants to do that, and it's very difficult to, right? Everybody wants a yard where they can come home and it's theirs, and they can fucking paint the walls and they don't have to ask anybody's permission, right? That kind of thing. And I completely agree. It's that whole thing about self-control and reliance and the wisdom and the legacy and the discipline and the hard work and creating tangible results. It's offering a structure and it's offering a deeper meaning. And at the end of the day, I think it's biological. And a lot of these progressive types, they try to use their academic prowess to argue that, they're above biology and they've gone past it. They've mentally evolved past it. But at the end of the day, you cannot beat biology. It's going to happen either way. You see a lot of, for example, strong independent women. As soon as something goes down, they're running and the men step forward because that's just biologically ingrained. It's just how it is, right? And, you can't beat nature. But anyway, I want to jump into this next segment here. The language trap. This is a problem that the right-wingers have had for the last 10 years. And I've been following this as I've kind of developed my political career and my base knowledge in politics. I've kind of followed this whole societal thing back and forth. The big problem is the language and the propaganda. That's where the liberals are winning, right? And it's called neuro-linguistic programming. Make sure you take a note of that if you're listening. Neuro-linguistic programming. That refers to the way words hit emotionally. And that's really the propaganda right there. And conservatives, right-wingers, the Trump's Make America Great Again, or that we have to restore the country, or we have to go back to how it was when it was fucking awesome, that hurts the movement, because it makes it easy for progressives to paint right-wingers as nostalgic for oppression, nostalgic for a worse time for the equalities of people, right? And we have to take responsibility for that and, push that this isn't going backwards, because when you look at the past, it really wasn't better in any way. If you listen to John F. Kennedy's first address to the State of the Union, he talks about, I think it was in 1959 or 1960, wages, or the cost of living and the cost of housing are outpacing wages. Sound a little familiar today, right? If you look at the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, there's always been these same troubles. These are universal. And history doesn't rhyme, it repeats, like Mark Twain said. Right? These aren't, things that we should be going back to. So when we say restore, it invokes a time before civil rights and before that workplace equality, when the boss could just slap the woman on the ass and shit and nothing would happen. Right? And the Rodney King beatings and all that type of shit, right? And the Oka crisis and all those kind of standoffs. And then because of that kind of, language that we're using, it makes us stuck in this position in debating where you're always defending yourself. And when you're debating, you never want to be defending yourself, because it always looks like, whoa, man, I'm not the bad guy here. It's a very bad position to be in. And I just want to highlight that we aren't defending, we are advancing, right? And we're not restoring anything. There's nothing to restore. It wasn't better in the past. Of course, there were better things, and there's worse things now, and there's better things now that were worse in the past, right? And you know what I mean? And we need to take control of it and start using language of advancing. And we have to take responsibility for our future and not seek to put blame on the past. And we need to build from where we are now, right? Because the only thing that's coming tomorrow is the future. The right is about moving forward, and we need to move forward with that discipline, the resilience, and ultimately that legacy and the tangible results. And it's about doing the hard work to build something worth inheriting. That's kind of what the right is all about. And if we can demonstrate that, and instead of like Donald Trump, you see in his new kind of way that he's governing in the second term, it's all about getting caught in an argument all the time, right? And he's not really making that much tangible progress with fixing the country. You know what I mean? It's the way he's doing with ICE. It seems very inhumane and barbaric, and that's why he's losing a lot of support with that. And with the way, this big, beautiful bill, it's not really fixing much. It's giving the money, it's giving the military more money, but it's not really making your life as an American better. Up here in Canada with Mark Carney, it's his actions aren't doing anything to make our lives better. And Pierre Poilievre, my hope is that if he gets in power, it's not going to be doing these political stunts to try and gain political, one-ups or whatever, that he's going to actually focus on tangible results. And I think that's how we're going to change the next generation. It's just build it and they will come. People are naturally going to follow you. If you kind of carry yourself in a certain way, people just tend to follow you. And that's how we're going to raise good citizens, and that's how we're going to raise good people. That's really all I had to say about the conservative blueprint, about how we need to recapture the initiative on gaining supports from young people, because again, it's the next generation. These old liberal boomers are going to die off eventually. They've done nothing but ruin the planet. Let's be quite honest. Let's just say it how it is. They just don't want to let go of power, and they never want to see others doing better than themselves. I mean, that's just how it is. But every time they come over to your house, they're always like, this is how you live? And they're the first people to tell you how much their house is worth and how much they bought it for, all that shit. And we see members of this generation dropping dead in the halls of Congress and, having their dementia episodes at the podium, right? These people will not let go of power. So eventually it's going to be young people that are taking over, and we need to win them over. And I just think that's a better way to do it. That's kind of all I wanted to rant about with that. So I would say to end this part off, if you're tired of the noise and tired of this chaos and the emptiness, look to the right wing. And again, it's not you start becoming a right winger. It's a slow journey towards it, right? And it's not necessarily the truth, but it's a better way of looking at the world. And we need to, as conservatives, not paint it as nostalgia for the past, but as the only real progress left. I want to thank you guys for listening. If this resonated with you, share it, subscribe, and like it. Let's keep building forward. I'm not asking for money yet. I just want to do these for fun, to kind of get the word out there, get my thoughts out there, and scream into the fucking void.